Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Game Dev Local Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Morgan. My pronouns are he, him. And in today's session, we're going to get some advice on how to get into the games industry, how to pivot your skill set from a different industry and to come into games, and what life is like as a games producer. So today we've got a special new guest who's also going to be a host going forward after this episode. It's Daisy. Give us a little wave, Daisy. And Daisy is referred to by she, her. She is a producer at Glowmade, and we'll chat about them a little bit later. And she's going to be joining the GDL podcast as a host, which is exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, very happy to be on board, get started on all of this. Yeah, so yeah, it's nice to kind of do this first session, to have this sort of little interview, and yeah, just chat about. Well, who doesn't like to talk about themselves and things? So yeah, but obviously talking of the journey of getting in, etc., and hopefully that can sort of help or resonate with some people, whoever's listening.
Yeah, that's awesome, Daisy. You are right that everyone's favourite subject is definitely themselves. So just quickly, before we jump into the professional side of Daisy, let's do a quick few questions. I just want to kind of get to know your geeky side and your gaming side. So what is your favourite game?
Cool. Go for it. Yeah. So obviously everyone's favourite question. Like, it's difficult to sometimes narrow it down and think of the number one, the top game. For me though, I think it has to be Red Dead Redemption 2. I am part of the loyal small community that is left still riding our horses. I think it has to be Red Dead. I think it's one of those games where it is a total escapism from everything and sort of never ending. Yeah. And I've actually sort of drawn out the campaign over a year. So I actually haven't, even though obviously I know the ending and I think everybody does, I actually haven't got to that point. I am very close. But yes, I think I've got to stop sort of, skinning animals and all the, having shoot-ups in towns and actually sort of finish it. But yes, Red Dead Redemption 2 is definitely my go-to.
That's awesome. To play over a whole year, that's quite, you've definitely got your value out of that for sure. I've actually not played the second one. I've only played the first, which I know is probably a bit criminal, but it's definitely on the list, and it looks totally awesome, especially like you're saying for escapism.
Oh, it's excellent. And sometimes you just think, do you know what? I just want to go fishing, Or sometimes I just I'm going to go to the barber and just get a new haircut, get a new outfit. I think that's why it's one of those games that's a really standout. You can put so much time and effort and hours into it, and maybe you're not necessarily making progress towards the campaign, but it is just being involved in that world. But downside of that can be you then don't sort of play other new games that come up. So you have to really you have to balance it. You have to think, okay, am I in the mood to kind of go back and play that for a good few hours and do something a bit casual, or do I want to play like next game that's come out, it could be the next Hellblade or Hades, and Hellblade also fantastic. That's second on my list for ultimate games, so quite different. Nice. Two different games, different. But it's good to have a nice variety.
Yeah, one cheers you up and the other one makes you like super tense and uncomfortable. I don't know. No, Hellblade does that really cool. Okay, so what about favorite gaming snacks? So when you're playing Red Dead, what would you eat?
So it's probably the most impractical. And to be honest, if you're picking a gaming snack, like the last thing you want to do is kind of get like bits of crumbs and things on your fingers, and then your controller's all greasy and dirty. It's the worst thing. But it has to be giant Wotsits. I think for anyone that's experienced having a sharing bag for yourself, obviously, no one's going to share them. The sharing bag of giant Wotsits, and you have to either be a cruncher or a melter, or you can have it all be a bit of both. But those are the kind of the two fighting sides, and so having just a whole bag of that. and then you've kind of got this like cheesy like powder on your fingers, and then you're like, oh my god, but I've got like I'm being swarmed by enemies now, and I have to keep playing, but now there's bits of cheese everywhere, and I think it just makes the whole experience a little bit more intense. So giant Wotsits, the top of the snack. Not the most practical, but most enjoyable, I'd say.
No, definitely not practical. I thought you were going to go after you said you don't want to get your hands messy, go off in a sort of more clean direction. But yeah, Wotsits are obviously overpowered in terms of being an amazing gaming snack. So totally get that one. What about a fun fact that people might not know about you?
Yeah, so I would say quite a few years back, I was actually going to go into a different direction career-wise. I was going to be going into forensics. So I had a position to sort of be in charge and manage evidence that would come in, and just managing that and keeping on top of it, and liaising with the police and different cases to give them evidence and whatever comes into little bags and boxes. But I thought perhaps it might not be the path for me. They had an interesting sort of sense of humour, I would say, when I went for the interview, which was,
quite dark.
They said, it's quite funny because last week we just received a tow. And I was like, oh, interesting.
Wow.
Okay. I might just put a pause on going in this direction, see how I feel about this. But yeah, so yeah, interesting fact is I probably, I could have gone in a very, very different direction. But well,
yeah,
glad I didn't, because I don't want to be receiving different little like the Tesco freezer bags with, I don't know, goodness knows, fingers and ears and all things, and instead of helping to make games. So I think I made a wise choice.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely picked the more fun option. I guess the question is, do you now play like detective games? Do you still like that kind of forensic science side of things? Like, do you find any video games or mystery games or anything like that interesting as well? Or has there been any crossover?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think there is that interest, and you have to kind of like be in that mindset of, am I ready to kind of play these games and etc. But even not necessarily playing them, but actually watching streams on them. So I definitely find, and I think a lot of people find now, that it's really, really difficult to fit and manage your time outside of work to be able to just sit down and play. And that can be a number of things. Perhaps you have family as well. So there's always these other commitments that come up. So it's really difficult to actually narrow down that time and think, oh, do you know what? It was so good when we were younger, and I didn't have to think about all these extra things, and I could just sit down and play for about 6 to 8 hours straight. So it's so nice to it's lovely to sort of think about, all these different games I want to play, whether they be, as you said, a little bit more case focused or mystery or thriller or that kind of thing. But it's about what you can do and play in the time that you've got. So actually, sometimes if I don't have just the after a long day at work, sometimes you don't necessarily have the energy to jump on. So actually, for me, I definitely find now that I watch a lot of streams. So I have a few favourite streamers. So Gab Smolders, some other people, and sometimes that's just quite nice to still feel that you're watching somebody else play, but it's a different level of energy. You haven't got the controller, you're not using that same sort of focus, but you're still having a different experience of doing that with somebody else and watching them play through. So that's I think after a long day, I'm like, I just want to eat my giant bag of Wotsits and sit there in pajamas and just watch a good horror stream, and then that's it for the evening. Yeah.
So Wotsits his favourite streaming snack and gaming snack. That is, the queen of Wotsits.
There might be a problem here, I'm realising. I think I need to change snacks, change habits. Yeah, it's a phase.
What about chocolate and sweets? There's so many good things out there. But that's awesome. That's really, really cool. I guess it'd just be really cool to hear about you now. Like, how have you got into games? I mean, we caught up before this, but what brought you into games? And have you enjoyed the journey so far? Yeah, how's it all going?
Yeah, so I really enjoy sort of talking about this subject, and everybody has their own path and their own story to tell. And I think that's what's so lovely about it, is the more that people share those experiences and journeys, the more it can potentially resonate with other people, or perhaps other people can sort of get, sort of hints and tips or things that they didn't think about. So for myself, I'm originally from Oxford, and kind of growing up in Oxford, it's a lot more, it's lots of fields, it's very countryside, it's beautiful, absolutely love it. But there is not a very big video game community there. There are a couple of studios there, but it's not too big. So for me, kind of growing up, it was very much, I just loved games. I actually used to watch, I watched my brother play, and that's how I kind of then got into it, was watching him play and then playing myself.
Awesome.
But that sort of, it very much was I think for everybody, when you're that age, it's a dream. It's a real dream job to think, this is amazing. This is something I could actually work in. And then when you kind of do look into how, the actual practical steps. Okay, I've decided this is what I want to do. How do I get into it? And at that point, at that time, it was very much any sort of researching online. The direction would be pushed of, okay, you have to be fairly good at maths, and you'll then go down, programming route, or perhaps, if you're good at art, or that's what you naturally sort of align with, then you'll go down more of an art route. So it was a lot more limited in terms of avenues to kind of get in, and it was very much sort of funneled through going down an education route. So, I mean, I thought first, okay, art side, I was very much into art, quite creative. And I thought, great, this is, perhaps I can go into animation or concept artist. And then I sort of realized, all the praise from my dad over the years, like, oh, this is beautiful work. Of course you can, work in the industries. And sort of showed it to other people and realized actually it was a bit naff and actually wasn't that good. So this sort of dream, then sort of I thought, do you know what, actually perhaps it's okay to sort of put a pause on that dream, and go down other route. So actually my journey into the industry is, so I've only been in games for about 2.5 years, and I've just turned 30. So for me, I joined the industry at a much later age, when I'd already had a career, essentially. So I previously was in project management, but it really started when it was sort of around COVID time, and things were opening up a little bit more again. And I actually remember seeing an internship posted, which was basically saying this is actually open to people who don't have a background in games and perhaps are a little bit older or have already established a career, and we're open to sort of bringing across those transferable skills. And it was just from seeing this post, I think it might have been I think it actually might have been on Facebook, just from seeing that suddenly sort of made me think, oh, is this something that could maybe be a reality? This was a dream that I'd kind of thought was not going to be possible, pushed it so far down the line, just carried on with, having, a career in a different way. And when I saw that, I thought maybe perhaps this is a chance. And I have to kind of ask yourself at that point, okay, is this something that I am going to do, and I'm going to go for it? And if I do go for it, I have to give it 150%. If I really want to give myself the best possible chance to get into the industry, because it is, as we know, it is so tough. But particularly, I think coming from, growing up somewhere where there really isn't a focus on video games as much. So, there's not as much of a sense of community there. So that can be a little bit tougher. So, I think at that point, I just kind of thought, do you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to absolutely go for it and give it my all. And so at that point, I spent about, so my whole journey then at that point was around sort of up to about 8 months, I would say. And so during that time, I had to kind of ask myself, what can I do to put myself in the best possible position in order to get an interview? Just to get to that point. And there's a lot of work that you have do an extortionate amount of work. And it's hard. It is hard. There's no denying that. And I think it's important through that journey, checking in with yourself, being like, is this something I can still do? Because there will be tough moments, there will be great moments, but you have to kind of think, is this something I can maintain? Because you also don't know where the finishing line is. You could be putting in so much work and effort, and actually it might not work out. There was absolutely a very high chance of I could feel and do as much as I possibly could, but if I wasn't, I didn't know if there was going to be success at the end of it, how more can I continue to go? So I think, but actually at that point, yes, put myself in the best possible position. So networking, that was a huge thing. So just almost not having, an important step of this is to not kind of have that shame. Because at the end of the day, you've got nothing to lose. If you message somebody or reach out to them, or perhaps go to an event and talk to them, what have you got to lose? And it's really difficult to actually, and it's difficult for different people. Some people might be a bit more introvert or extrovert, so that kind of having that communication can come more naturally to some people than others. So that can be, it can be a lot harder for others. But it is about kind of taking that breath and thinking, I've got nothing to lose. Why not? Let me just see, because you're putting yourself then to give yourself a chance or an opportunity that may then benefit you. So I think networking was a really huge thing for me with getting in, and that was from, as I say, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, going to different events, and having points of conversation as well. So if you go to, there's loads of free events around the UK, which are absolutely fantastic. There's so many opportunities for people there. But when you go to those events and you say, for example, you watch a talk, you've already got a talking point there to approach that person to say, I really enjoyed what you were saying. Would you perhaps be able to give me a little bit more of your time, perhaps later on today, or in a call or an email? It's just about doing those steps. And so through that, there was actually somebody that I was going through reading articles, also research as well. Do your research, do your homework. And it was actually through, I was reading an article from a producer, and I found him on LinkedIn, reached out to him, said, I really enjoyed your article. And it was about his journey of getting into the industry, also not from having a games background. And from that, he then became my mentor. And so again, it's all adding to the points of putting yourself in that best possible position. So so then having a mentor, I had loads of people that I connected with that gave me, recommendations, and, they, references as well. They were more than happy to sort of, speak to other people on my behalf. And so I felt that I'd done everything I possibly could for this particular internship. Yeah. And so can imagine how it then felt when then I didn't get it. So and that was, just receiving that, not even a phone call or anything, just receiving that email. Nope, sorry, you didn't get it. And you think, my goodness, I've done everything I possibly could to put myself in the best position to get this, and I didn't get it. And at that point, you just have to kind of put a pause, just put a stop, take a breather, have your time to almost grieve in a way. Because it is difficult. You do need to allow yourself that time to be like, do you know what? That's a shame. Like, I was really disappointed, et cetera. But then that's when it's when you've sort of had that time, you have to ask yourself, what do you do? Do you get back on the horse? Can you get back on the horse? Are you ready to do that? Are you ready to continue on? Or do you want to pause and step away? And either options are okay. That's the thing. Either options are absolutely fine. And actually at that point, I'm glad I did think, no, this isn't going to be something that's going to kind of defeat me. I will still keep going. And then a few months later, everything changed. I then was having interviews with 3 different studios back to back, etc. It was just, it then can just round the corner, it can just blow up. And it did. And that's how I then ended up working at Glowmade. And here I am now, sort of what a journey it's been. So now 2.5 years in the industry.
Yeah.
I'm now doing panels, talking about transferable skills, going to universities and doing talks there, and just working with just the most amazing people. So coming from living in Oxford, where there wasn't as much of a sense of community and there wasn't people I could talk to as much in games, I'm now surrounded by people that I can talk about it with every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you said so much, so many great things in there that I think people can pick up on. I think you're right. Getting into the industry is a dream for a lot of people. It was a dream for me, and I have a similar sort of background where I transitioned to games sort of later on after a career in a different industry. And yeah, getting into games is always this kind of thing that you think is almost not possible. And you'd think it'd be so competitive, and it is competitive, of course. But like you're saying, with the layering up of things like, networking, job applications, upskilling yourself, lots of different, putting the effort in different ways like that, eventually it all starts to kind of feed back into one another. And yeah, eventually it lands in the right place. So I think, like you're saying, if you're committed to finding a job in games, and you keep working hard at it, and yeah, you're real with yourself and say that it might take some time, that eventually something will land. So yeah, it's really, really cool. It's really interesting. Did you have like an original? Did you have a moment where you were like? So you said that your brother kind of inspired you in a way to kind of like or be interested in playing video games. Was there a moment, like a turning point where you're like, I really want to get into the games industry? Was there something that kind of, like a special moment that really kind of made you think, right, that's it, I want to get into the industry? Was there, someone inspired you, a game that inspired you, a moment or anything like that? Or
yeah, I think it was perhaps when I was sort of maybe like 15, 16, 17. Sort of playing, I think I was playing, goodness, maybe like Gears of War, Kingdom Hearts, like so
Nice.
many excellent games.
Great games.
And actually and I remember one particular game, this came out a little bit later, Valiant Hearts, which I really, really, really recommend. It's an excellent game. And I think it was the point where I realised actually it's what the power of what games can do on an emotional level. And I think that games are such a wonderful, beautiful thing in that they allow us to have a sense of escapism, but they also allow us to put ourselves in a character that perhaps we would want ourselves represented in a much bigger, greater world. And so it can make people, sometimes for people who feel perhaps, whatever their sort of situation is, they may feel not as significant or small, or they don't feel like they're making much of an impact. Actually, in a game, you can make a huge impact in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, the turning point was realizing the magnitude of what games can do for people, for emotions, and down sort of more on a psychological way. And I think that, there are games that can, little moments that can make us laugh, and moments where they can really make us cry. And I think for there to be a medium that allows us to have that level of physical response, and it has such an impact on us, I think that was the point where I realized this is something that it's not just a case of picking up a controller, playing for a few hours, that was a good time, and put it away. This is something that can have such a positive impact on so many people, so many ages. And I think it's something, especially now, that multiplayer is just totally expanded. Like I was very much playing more, as I say, with not having much of a community, played a lot of solo games, just single campaigns and etc. So not so much on multiplayer side, but now kind of being in the industry, it's so fascinating seeing the different games that people are into and etc. And it just brings you together. People that are sort of halfway around the world, and you can play a game with them, and that's great. And you're going to have a great time for maybe like an hour, and you may never speak to them again. But you shared that experience in that moment. And so, I think a real turning point for me was just realizing what an impact it can have on individuals' lives, and that's such a lovely thing, and that's something I would be wonderful to be part of, to help towards making games that can have an impact in that way.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really, really true. I mean, it's such a powerful medium, isn't it? The fact that you can kind of interact and engage and become your own hero and kind of have different for games with different emotions and different feelings that you've got going on. It's incredibly powerful and sort of therapeutic and yeah, I think a lot of great potential things that people get out of games, and often they still get a bad rap, don't they? But yeah, it is yeah, it's good fun. So tell me a little bit about your role as a producer before you got into games industry. So you're still a producer now, right? And you worked as a producer before you got into the games industry. What was that like, and how has it kind of helped you in the role you're in now? Is it completely different, or is it the same, or yeah?
So I think with the role of production, it is very much communication based, and I kind of think that the word sort of communication, the word gets thrown out and it's so broad and it covers so much, but I think it's really important to understand what makes good communication. There's so many different elements and understanding of it, and I think having that understanding of all the different moving parts of communication, that then forms you to make a successful or good producer. But yes, I think that production is it's this interesting balance of you are managing a project that can be has millions of pounds invested, right? And so there are dates that you have to adhere to, and etc. So it's kind of about, I think there's often a phrase that is sort of thrown around, which is like herding cats, but actually I think I see it as more, we are helping to kind of keep the sort of the machine running, keep the cogs working in a way that is that is working at a good rate. Nothing's burning out, but also nothing is sort of slowing down. So it's about the understanding that it's a project. It's a project and it's a game. It's worth a lot of money, and we've got to get it out the door. But there's the other side, which is there's a human element to it, a real big human element to it, and I think that. In order to be a good producer, it's really about being able to make that connection with your team. So I currently manage a team of around roughly about 12 people. But the area that we're working in is essentially sort of the meta side of the game. So we're sort of building the systems that help towards player progression. And allowing people to sort of tailor their experience, whether that be through different skins on costumes or weapons or upgrades or settings. So the area that we're handling is very, very vast and has lots of different moving parts. So the role of the producer is so important for you to be keeping an eye and managing all those different parts, and also understanding, okay, well, if we change something here, what is the ripple effect? What is that going to be? And who does that then impact? Who do I need to get into that room? How do I communicate to them? Are all those people in office? Are they remote? So you have to think about all these small little things in order to get to the main point, which is, how can we share this information from here to here? So yeah, like production is it's fantastic. It's wonderful. And I think that it naturally aligns with people who are, their skills are sort of in organization, in people management, being able to kind of also, manage priorities, but also not only managing the priorities of everybody else, in your team, but managing your own priorities and having that balance of, okay, what is the main thing I have to focus on today? And it could be that one big thing that has to be delivered in 2 days' time. And how long is that going to take? However, there's also these smaller things that I have to do as well. So it's really important you're kind of constantly making that sort of balance, all towards progression, whether that be on a day-to-day level or whether that be on a project whole level. So yeah, there's a lot. It's a great job. I absolutely love it, but it very much aligns with people who naturally kind of enjoy sort of organizing, working with people, project management, that kind of thing. So it is definitely one of those roles that when it comes to transferable skills, it is very transferable for people that are not from games. So in that respect, it's a good transferable role.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess it often sounds really pressurized as well, because the way you made it sound like you've got to manage all these different teams, all these different objectives, lots of different, your to-do list must be like 100 points long at least. Is it quite a pressurized role? Is it quite intense at times, or do you find it, or does it come in peaks and troughs, I guess?
It absolutely can be. And I think that the same can be said for any role, to be honest. I think if you're coming towards, if we're talking practically, if you're coming towards the end of a milestone, and perhaps a programmer, they have a lot of critical bugs on them, that's going to be a really stressful time for them. And likewise for production, I think especially when it comes down to, planning side of things, like a particular week, once a month, it absolutely is going to feel more intense at those times. But the important thing is that it's about keeping that balance, and it's also about checking in with each other and making sure you're working together as a team. That's really, really important. We're supposed to be the sort of champions in communication, and so we have to also lead by example. So if there's times where it feels like, do you know what, actually there are more things now coming in that I have to manage, I have to now think, have I got the capacity to manage all of those? Because if I don't, the level of quality of service that I'm going to be giving to all those different parts is now going to be reduced because you're adding more in. Yeah. So at that point, it's really important to say, actually, do you know what? I'm not doing as best as I can. I can't, in a practical sense, in the time that I have in the day, I can't give the same level of quality. So then I have to think, you have to then communicate that to your team and then think how that is almost as part of, working in, we often hear the phrase of, working in agile and working in an agile way, but that's what it is about. It is about sort of constantly looking, is this something that is sustainable? Because things will always change. And so you have to kind of retrospectively look back and think, do you know what, actually we need to sort of potentially, bring more people in or share the workload a little bit out or give more responsibility to other people. It's really important that you're, as a producer, and actually for anybody, that you're working in a healthy way, but also then you have to still balance that against, it can sometimes feel like work can be your life, but actually it is so important to take that step back, because you're not living at the office. You do have a life outside of it as well. So yeah, you have to have a good balance and to be able to maintain it. And that's what then, if you're able to do that consistently and work in that way, then that's how projects can be, projects are shipped. But the important thing is you want to be able to at the end when you have shipped a game, you want to be able to look back and say, do you know what, I'm really proud of the journey that we took to do that. And that doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to go perfect. It's absolutely not. And there's definitely going to be things where you are going to make mistakes, but it's important to sort of learn from those mistakes. And then if you learn from them, that's how you then grow, and then you then apply that then to the next project. What sort of balancing of things. It's not stressful at all. It's totally fine.
It sounds a little bit stressful. No, I'm kidding. I think you're right. I think you definitely need to be able to, and it's a really hard skill, I think, for anyone to say no to something. Like if you're at capacity, if you're working at your kind of limit, you've got a lot on, to be able to sort of not necessarily say no, but to be able to say, like, I'm at capacity, can we do it this way? Can we get some help with this? That kind of thing. That's a really hard skill, because it's sort of, you think when you're being paid for a job that, it might impact your relationships and your reputation. So there are challenges, and I guess as a producer you're probably used to managing that quite a lot because you've got lots of different things coming at you all the time. And yeah, you're totally right about maintaining work-life balance. I've had weeks, as I'm sure we all have, where we've worked way above and beyond our normal sort of working hours. And in the end, if I was to look back at those moments now and think, did I get loads of extra work done? Was it completely efficient? I really don't think it was. And did my happiness suffer a little bit? Yeah, it definitely did. So I think finding that balance is really crucial. But yeah, I mean, obviously, job's a job. Sometimes we get busy moments, like you said. So yeah. It's all really interesting. I mean, one thing I wanted to ask actually is, on your way into the industry, when you were applying to be, a producer in the games industry, what were some of the challenges you came up against? And I guess with those challenges, for anyone that's listening in, what kind of things any little tips and tricks to help people get around some of those challenges?
Yeah, I think one thing that's not often spoke about actually is, yes, obviously earlier I was saying, go to different events, reach out to people, network and etc. But it's also important to think of the safety side of that also, because you are essentially almost putting yourself in slightly in a vulnerable position. You're reaching out to somebody to say, I want to be in the industry, and almost I would do whatever it takes to get in. I really want your advice, please, So you're essentially going to somebody to say, I please share your skills and experience. And so sometimes, people can, and I don't think, sometimes people can slightly take advantage of that. So you have to be really, really careful around the sort of safety aspect of it. And I don't think that's sort of slightly spoken about as often as perhaps it should be. And especially when going to events as well, you can kind of get sort of thrown into the excitement of everything, and you think, my goodness, this person's talking to me like they work for a studio that I've really wanted to work with. They've said that, we can go for a coffee and meet up with them and etc. But then they want my personal number, but yet I'm connected with them on LinkedIn. So in that respect, I think that it can be quite easy to get swept up in the sort of excitement and the drive and the motivation to get into the industry. But it's really important to kind of take those step backs and think, actually, is this okay? Do I feel comfortable in doing things this way? And I think another thing is that, talking of challenges, I think especially when you are looking to get in, is there will be moments of disappointment. As I said, like when you work so hard, so hard to get in, and you are applying for studios left, right, and centre, and your heart might be set on a particular one. It can be very difficult to accept the disappointment if you don't get that role, because you pin so much onto it. So I think that it's really, really important to kind of teach yourself to be like, okay, I'm going to give myself that sort of grieving time. I am upset about it, etc. But being able to then ask yourself, can I continue? Do I want to continue? Or do I want to perhaps put a pause on this and come back to it later? So that's something that is I think the more that people can sort of train themselves to set themselves up for what failure may feel like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a failure on your character or your work. It just means perhaps you were not right for that studio. And that's okay. That does happen, because for us, especially, when we're looking at hires, we have to always think, at what time are we at with the project? Do we need somebody to just jump straight on? They have those skills and experience to and the confidence to just sort of lead things and that's dependent on, as I say, the time of the project that we're at. So for us, it's and for any studio, we'll always kind of measure that, because we also want it to be an experience that's sort of fruitful for that person. We want to be in a position where perhaps where we take on more like we accept more speculative applications, or take on more juniors, that we then have the capacity and the availability to help teach them and bring them into the industry in a way, and not just throw everything on them. Sure. Yeah, I would say, like, for anybody that is kind of that does apply for a lot of studios, and they feel like perhaps they're not getting as much success as they want to, as they imagine they would, that's not necessarily a reflection on you. It can just be a case of the studio thinking, like, who is it that we need right now? And I think it's very difficult right now, because there are the pool is massive. The pool is full of people. Hundreds of people applying for one particular role. So that means the chance of being successful in even getting just an interview is a lot slimmer than it was before. But things do change, and it's not always going to be like that. So that's why I think it's particularly important at those moments where perhaps you feel like you've had a rejection email, just ask yourself, is this the right time for me to get into the industry? And if it's not, that's okay. I think that's the most important thing, is it is okay to put a pause on dreams. It really, really is. And that's a really hard thing to do, but it's exactly kind of what I did. And if anything, I couldn't be more proud and grateful of waiting. I think actually it was much better for and this might not be the case for everybody, but for myself, I think it was much better going into the industry, being a little bit more older, wiser, a bit more mature, having just, not to say that I was some sort of like rebellious child when I was younger, but I think giving yourself that bit of time to have a bit more real world experience. And I didn't always have a background in project management. I worked, at one point I was working in a bakery making cakes, and another point I was actually working in a nursery. So you can have a broad background, but it's okay to sort of work on those transferable skills, hone in on them, and work on the ones that you're also not so good at, to put yourself perhaps in a much better position of going back to that studio, be like, okay, they said I wasn't right for them at the time, maybe a few years later, maybe now is the right time. So
Yeah, I think we live in a good time where I would almost say I would encourage people to bounce around, try new jobs, try different things out, experiment, explore, and like you're saying, Daisy, that's interesting. Actually, I hadn't thought about that before, but it is okay to put a pause on your dream. I think in my situation, I'd always loved video games, but I guess I just thought it was out of my reach to get into the games industry, and it wasn't until I got really fed up in another industry that was like, okay, I need to do something I care about. So now it's time to kind of dedicate myself to getting into games, and obviously I feel super fortunate to be in the industry, and my journey's not over yet, but I think I've been rejected so many times, and as a sort of partnerships / salesperson, one of the things that I picked up on that I think is a really powerful tool in a kind of sales job is actually, if a job application, if you get rejected from a job application, instead of you almost sort of need to learn to embrace it and to kind of let that fire you up to apply for more, because every time you apply for a job, every time you write a job application, a cover letter, every time you have an interview, you are growing, and you are kind of developing yourself and preparing for when that one that comes along that you probably can get. You've had all the practice before, you've asked all the questions, you've had all the thoughts about what you might need to be doing in those kind of jobs, and really you're just kind of building up for that one moment, and everything else that comes before, every rejection that comes before, is just really a step towards that moment. And I think I definitely, embracing rejection is a really hard thing to do. Obviously we all no one likes to be rejected, and it's just it's a primal instinct. But yeah, learning to kind of let it fire you up, and changing your perspective on what rejection is, I think, is a really important skill, especially as you're saying in such a competitive industry, because it is competitive, and right now the games industry is extremely competitive. But yeah, persistence and the layering of networking and other things we've been talking about definitely will stand you in good stead in the long run. Yeah, so. In terms of, I mean, you talked just a minute ago about pivoting your skill set into the industry. If someone else was in your shoes right now, as this would have been great advice to me actually a few years back. What would you advise them? They've been working in a different industry for a few years. Now they've decided they want to get into games. Is there any kind of like particular advice about how to do that, whether it's writing the CV or kind of how they work out what a producer in one industry looks like compared to what a producer in the games industry might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one thing I would say is identify what skills feel natural to you. I think it's really, really, really important, because you may look at a job and think, oh, do you know what's really cool to be a games designer? Like, I love the idea of that, or to be an animator. But actually, you need to kind of do your research into those roles, and then think, is this something that I could see myself doing, and that I naturally align with? So, say for example, for myself, like sort of being organized and things, it was a very, very natural thing for me. And that can just be, and I think what's important is to identify, it doesn't necessarily have to actually be in a work sense. It can just be in a general personality sense. So, I really enjoy organizing the fridge. I love a food shop. It's the best thing ever. And I'll actually organize it in the trolley. So I'll have the heaviest things in one section, so they go first on the aisle.
Wow.
And then they'll go at the bottom of the bag. Like the joy that I get out of that. What I don't get the joy out of is then going to perhaps either an Aldi or Lidl, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to get it all in the bag. So I know for me, sometimes speed is not a skill that I'm particularly good at. And so sometimes I would, I do like to kind of take my time with things and etc. So what I would say is particularly if you are if you really love or like the idea of getting into the games industry and think, what's the sort of starting point, I think it's really important to see if it's something, first of all, if you want to get into the industry now, look at what is happening in regards to the job market and in general. Obviously, as we all know, right now, presently, it's a really tough time from all the layoffs. So it's really important to think actually the area that maybe you want to go in. And it doesn't, by the way, doesn't necessarily have to be in games development. What I would say is that even if you want to be in the games industry, there are other avenues. So if perhaps you're in HR, we have HR people obviously here, and office managers and etc. But they're still part of the games industry. Actually, they are still in the community and they are still working with other people. And actually, perhaps that can be a really good avenue. Because they go potentially, if someone's working in HR now in another industry, obviously that's just the whole role is transferable to any really. So that's a really good avenue to think, okay, the role that you're currently doing, is that something that can be directly applied to the industry that you want to go for? But if that isn't the case, then I would say look at the skill sets that you naturally line with, and then identify which of those skill sets apply to which roles within the industry. I think that's a really important thing, because at the end of the day, there might be a role that seems really cool. Like I would love to be a designer. I think that's a really cool job. I think that every job here is great. Yeah. But I know that perhaps my skill set doesn't naturally align with being a designer. And so then, if maybe somehow I did have that role and I was doing that at Glowmade, I wouldn't be actually giving them my best, and I wouldn't be enjoying it myself, because I am not, it's not that you're setting yourself up for for failures, but you're not performing in the way that feels naturally satisfying to you. It's really important, I would say, is identify that skill set and where that can be applied.
Yeah, yeah. This is really informative, Daisy. I've realised I've been taking up loads of your time. We've been nattering for ages. We probably need to do a follow-up episode for this, but no, it's been really, really helpful. I think you're totally right. There's lots of different job types in the industry that maybe people don't think about outside of games development. And like you're saying, it could be a whole number of different things. Actually, Hitmarker has a really good, for anyone listening, Hitmarker has an amazing poster, a graphic layout of all the different types of jobs in the industry, and there are actually more than that. There's tons of them. So go and check that out if you're sort of looking to get into the industry and want to know what's out there. So that's really helpful. I think I guess it's probably a good opportunity for you to introduce yourself as a new host, actually, because just before we finish up, I think I know you're going to be hosting some episodes with us. So I guess, what are you excited to talk about? What do you want to chat about? You've obviously talked about some really awesome, transferring skills and being a producer here and loads of really great stuff. But is there, any kind of subjects that excite you the most to sort of chat about?
Yeah, so I think for me, I would like to do a real focus on sort of the human side of things. So as I kind of mentioned before, the word like communication, such a big word, it's so broad, but actually I think I'd quite like to kind of do a bit more of a deep dive into that and how you can utilize all the different skills of being a good communicator, and that can then apply to any role. And I think for me, the sort of subject matters are sort of more, as I say, more on the human side. So what does it mean to actually understand people and how you can get the best out of them? And I think that's particularly important, especially so much of us work remotely as well, so there's so many different use cases around that to think, how can I tailor an experience where I need to get certain level of information that I need from that person. So much more on human side of things, but then also and that doesn't necessarily even have to be applied to games. That can be sort of applied to any industry, but then also on course talking of games and stuff, I think for me the emotional impact of games. So I'm actually a huge indie horror fan. Absolutely love putting, like, just before I go to bed, putting on a late night indie stream, indie horror stream. It's great. So I think that it would be quite nice to sort of discuss a little bit more on what an emotional and psychological impact that these games can have, even in the short term. So having like an immediate response of like laughter or crying or etc. or joy, but actually how those games shape us and give us memories. I think we can all think about certain moments or certain games that we played that were much younger that really influenced us, and the impact that they had. So yes, I think more sort of around human element side of things, either with the people that you work with, or perhaps even when you're studying, and also how that can be translated into the games industry and games.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's exciting. I'm sure there'll be lots of good episodes to come as well on that. I guess finally, is there anything else you want to share with the audience, or anything that you missed out from today?
No, I mean, I think that for anyone that is sort of listening and kind of wants to sort of perhaps they are on that journey of doing research, etc., and networking and trying to get in, what I would say is it's really important to look for honesty, basically, and I think that it's really important to be honest about things at the moment, in terms of particularly, as we said, it's so tough. It is so tough right now to get in, and so if someone was to say, no, it's fine, like it's all great, it's perfect, we're the best industry ever, etc., I would I would question that. Nothing is perfect, nothing is the best. It is great because it is a hobby essentially that we all enjoy doing, but it is important to be sort of honest about these things. So I think for anybody that is doing any sort of research, it doesn't necessarily have to be, the top speaker, the top streamer, etc. It can also be from someone it's in a studio that's down the road from you. So I think kind of, get as many kind of opinions and hear as many experiences as you can. And that all helps to, building towards always this question that you need to ask yourself is, do I want to keep doing this? It's not a case of can I do it, it's do I want to keep doing it? So that's kind of what I would advise for anyone that's sort of in that particular point right now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Daisy. It's been absolutely awesome to have you here. And for anyone listening in, look forward to having Daisy hosting some of our podcasts in future. And to our listeners, just stay tuned for more episodes and updates from us. Join the Discord if you haven't, follow, engage, all that fun stuff. And come and check out our website and join the community. Thanks very much. Thanks, Daisy. Have a good one and take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.